What will happen first? Will Donald Trump finish off Putin with sanctions, or will the Ukrainian armed forces destroy Putin's oil refineries? These scenarios, we'll talk about it right now. It's our YouTube channel, War and Politics 24. My name is Irina Uzlova, and today with us is Yuri Rashkin, host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report and Rashkin Report in English, and local elected official in Wisconsin. Yuri, glad to see you very much. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for the invitation, and greetings and salutations to all our listeners and viewers.
Let's start. A lot of news, a lot of scenarios, and a lot of thoughts, I think, between us. Donald Trump admits meeting with Zelensky next week. I will probably meet with President Zelensky next week, Trump said. Also, Trump suggested he might meet with Putin very soon. He reiterated that he has always had a good relationship with the Kremlin dictator. Let's listen about it and then we'll discuss.
We've always had a good relationship. President Putin and I have always had a good relationship. That's why it's so sad that it happened. This would have never happened if I were president. It's so sad to see it happen. So many dead people. By the way, so many cities are demolished. They're like, you talk about Gaza? Well, take a look at Ukraine. So many of those cities are demolition sites. Demolished. So sad. Should have never happened. All those beautiful golden domes, but much more importantly, all those beautiful people are dead.
We are listening for the same statements for nearly second weeks, a few weeks, I think. But how important is it who Trump meets with first, and will he have a concrete plan of conditions and proposals by then, or will Trump formulate a plan after the meetings with Zelensky and Putin?
I think it was a key quote that you played by showing that how important to President Trump is to have good relations with Vladimir Putin. And frankly, I would really hope to see the day soon when President Trump says that he is willing to do something, even though it might hurt his relationship with Vladimir Putin. I would love to see that happen because I think that would be a very important signal for our foreign policy, which is currently moving in the direction of Vladimir Putin is our friend. We want to have good relationship with Vladimir Putin. Perhaps President Trump is surprised because it is actually Ukraine that is more interested in making a deal than Russia. Perhaps President Trump thought that once he comes to power, he's elected, due to the power of his, the respect and reverence for him, Putin and Zelensky will get together, and then President Trump can use stick and carrot to get quickly to the outcome that he desires. Well, and it turned out that Ukraine, which was the one speaking about how it's willing to fight forever and ever for to reach its restore its boundaries, all of a sudden apparently is willing to come to the table and sit and talk, and it is Russia which is not interested in coming to terms and peace. And therefore, I think President Trump is put into a difficult situation because he wants to accomplish peace and he wants to have good relationship with Vladimir Putin. I think it's going to be, as a way to accomplish that would be to meet with Vladimir Putin. And I think that President Zelensky here kind of is a stepping stone, really, to Kremlin, which I think is really the more desired place where President Trump would like to be, or at least to meet with Vladimir Putin. So I think that, and of course on top of that, you have to admit that when Donald Trump talks about destroyed real estate, there's something special that it rings in him, because he is at his heart a real estate developer. And when cities are destroyed and when buildings are destroyed, it's a terrible thing, even though he still remembers to say, and thank goodness for that, that it's not just about the building, it's about the beautiful people who are now dead, which is true. And many more who will be dead if Russia controls more of Ukraine or Russia controls Ukraine. There will be more people dead. So I think if we're concerned about people dying, we should help Ukraine, but that's maybe is a different story. So I think that the meeting is a perhaps step in the right direction, but I'm afraid that there will be a lot of dancing and footwork without much result. And what we need is we need United States to show that on one way or another, we're willing to continue to militarily support Ukraine now. And if that's going to happen, then everything else is cherry on this cake. But so far, we seem to have cherry but no cake.
But Keith Kellogg has said that Donald Trump is ready to double sanctions against Russia. Do you believe in such a scenario, and under what conditions should it happen? What will Trump's peace tactics be? Maybe not very peaceful for Putin, or not?
Look, I think that sanctions are great, but they're not the solution, as we know from years and years of different presidents, Democratic presidents, applying sanctions to Russia. We historically see Putin just laughing back, Russians just laughing back, and then in their social media they advertise workaround to get things done around sanctions, like advertised on YouTube channels of how you can get a passport to this country or that country. Yeah, but there's always a solution. Yeah, it may be corruption, but whatever, that's the world we live in. So Russia continues to survive, even though sanctions are a hassle, and it's a hustle too. But I think that talking about sanctions or tariffs with Russia is a beautiful thought, but we really don't do anything with Russia anymore. Even Russian vodka isn't Russian, so that's not going to produce the outcome. And really, the only thing that is going to, there's even a possibility of, which hasn't been mentioned by General Kellogg, and he kind of accepts that idea, but it doesn't seem to be the one that he actively promotes, is the idea of freezing Russian assets and then using using frozen Russian assets to pay for Ukraine's weapons. That doesn't seem to be a part of the package quite so far, but that would be good to add. And in the end, the cake there always has to be weapons to Ukraine. If General Kellogg, retired, is willing to fundamentally base this on the assumption that we have to make sure that Ukraine is there to negotiate, that Ukraine is able to be at the negotiation table because it has enough weapons now, we're going to have a difficult time otherwise. Ultimately, I have to say that it doesn't bode well for the importance of this project to Donald Trump to have had General Kellogg, with all due respect, being the person put in charge of this war in the middle of Europe. So there's probably could have been different people if, like during his first cadence, Donald Trump kept saying whenever there was some project that needed to be fixed, that Jared will take care of it. That Jared Kushner was the catch-it-all guy on comedy shows. People were making jokes about, wow, he's responsible for everything. What a guy. But at least it spoke of the fact that this is somebody who has president's ear, a president trusts. It's hard to even really gauge what is the level of trust that Donald Trump has with Keith Kellogg. I don't know if there's any. I trust that there's loyalty from Keith Kellogg to Donald Trump, but that's all we know. And if Keith Kellogg comes in with a suggestion, does it mean that Donald Trump is going to follow this? It's really hard to say because, in the end, it comes down to, is Putin going to do something? And who is Keith Kellogg to influence Putin? So it's kind of a figure that it's not really influential with Trump, not really influential with Putin, and it just really seems like stalling for time. And that is what worries, I think it would worries everybody who is concerned about future of Ukraine and Ukraine winning and being in a winning position at this negotiation table, and for the United States, for crying out loud, to project strength.
But Keith Kellogg is hawk, and we know it, and Putin knows it. Maybe he has influence on Putin.
Hard to imagine that Keith Kellogg, who almost seems like he was taken off a shelf and dusted off and then sent into combat, diplomatically speaking, is going to be the person that Vladimir Putin is going to say, oh, that's it. This is the man who I'm now terrified of. Because he will tell Donald Trump, and we know how good, like Donald Trump doesn't say, I value my good relations with Keith Kellogg. No, he says, I have good relations with Vladimir Putin. So Keith Kellogg really seems like an intermediary. So I think that perhaps the best thing that Keith Kellogg can achieve to do is to set up, promote, and arrange meeting between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. And I think this is really the big pinnacle of American foreign policy that will be the pride, the pinnacle of Trump foreign policy. Looking backwards, I suspect, if these people were to write text history books, because if good relations with Vladimir Putin are so important, then meeting Vladimir Putin must be so exciting. It must be like a mausoleum, like in Russia, in Moscow, there's a famous mausoleum where Lenin lays there, and then everybody, there's a line of tourists, and it seems like if there was a mausoleum of Putin, Trump would be first one in line. He just really wants to see him.
My regular guest, political strategist Igor Eidman from Germany, always says that the best sanctions will be tomahawks. Is this scenario unbelievable for you?
It is unbelievable, and I think that Igor Eidman is great and is one of those wonderful people that just promotes free thinking and great, thinking outside of Kremlin paradigms. But I think that it's really hard to imagine how this administration is going to hand over tomahawks to Ukraine. It would be if we were reasonable people in terms of, let's say Ukraine loses. Let's say everything goes badly. Oh my goodness, President of the United States must be just so embarrassed about this. He must feel awful about all, right? Because any normal person who would be in that position would just feel terrible. I mean, President Biden felt terrible about what was happening in Afghanistan, good, bad, ugly. But you can clearly tell he empathized with people and he tried, and American, any primary, right? But that's not what we associate with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a president who seems to be A, not very good at negotiations, and then B, declares himself a winner no matter what happens. So if you're Vladimir Putin, then you just kind of press forward and try to get whatever you want. And Donald Trump is going to say he's a big winner anyway, no matter what. But if you give Ukraine tomahawks, then they can hurt Vladimir Putin. And that can hurt relationship with Vladimir Putin. For Donald Trump, that's not good. So I think that just using that as a paradigm explains our foreign policy and possibly our internal politics as well, to a large extent. But I have to say that Igor is a good friend of mine, and I really enjoy reading his texts all the time. So subscribe to Igor Eidman if you're reading this, English, Russian, German, whatever.
And subscribe to your Rashkin YouTube channel, Rashkin Report, and Rashkin Report in English. And our YouTube channel, War and Politics 24, please too. We will be very happy, I promise. Yuri, you have already mentioned that Russian dictator Putin doesn't want confident peace and a strong peace and doesn't want real negotiations. But maybe you're wrong and maybe I'm wrong, because according to CNN, Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov claims that they are ready for negotiations with Ukraine, but on their own territorial terms. Peskov also states, as usual, that Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is illegitimate. So with whom and on what terms is the Russian Federation ready to talk? Russian or they are not ready to talk at all with us. Maybe they only dreams about conversation with Donald Trump, but without Ukraine.
Well, yes, I don't think this is a threesome. I think it's just a duet of Putin and Trump that they're speaking of. See, the situation is interesting, and I think it's hard for English speakers sometimes to understand. Because people ask me all the time, how do people in Ukraine feel about Zelensky? Do they love him? Do they hate him? But how do they feel about him? And I explained that it is my understanding that in Ukraine there's a long-standing tradition of not liking their leaders. Like whoever is in charge, Ukrainians don't seem to respect that person very much. And so they feel the same way towards Zelensky as well. But at the same time, he stayed. He didn't run. He led resistance, and the country is fighting back for 3 years under his leadership. So I think that there's that. There's another piece to this, which is that Ukraine can't have elections while it is at war. It doesn't work. The country can't have, for multiple reasons, it wouldn't work. So in order for elections to take place, and by the way, those elections, what is the purpose of them? Likely to put somebody who is more friendly to Putin in charge of Ukraine. That would be why Russia is so concerned, because it's trying to have somebody else that it can talk to, not Zelensky, because that didn't work out so well. So maybe they want to talk to somebody else, right? But for that, there has to be a ceasefire. There has to be ending of war enough that there can be elections. And I think that is the balance that on one hand, Putin might strike, but at the same time, if things are going very well for him because Ukraine is not getting weapons, then he might just continue pushing forward because he's got kind of bunch of good options. He might sit at a negotiation table. He might go at the front. He might look at the Washington department and see what's happening and evaluate his options and proceed forward. And Ukraine has to at the same time resist all of it and deal with Russian propaganda and disinformation that is going on several fronts, including such as, oh, we would like to have negotiations, but with a different president. Really, who is the legitimate president? You know, they call Zelensky illegitimate. Clearly, Putin is the one who is having concerns about his legitimacy. Because who was not elected? Who was, it's not Zelensky. This is Putin's problem that he's just projecting on somebody else. And because really it makes no sense to make deals with Putin because he always breaks them. So what a perfect pair. You have person who always breaks deals and you have person who can't make deals. Amazing. I mean, this is not Zelensky. This is a comment towards, our situation in Washington, D.C.
Really, you are quite right, because for all 25 years of his dictator's regime, no once and anybody had voted to Putin, because all the elections is only like fake and nothing else. So we understand that Putin is not legitimate, but they use such statements like a mirror, talking about themselves. Really, we understand it.
There's an interesting side note to this, because you're right, Russian elections are not reliable and basically fake, but at the same time Russian people do appear to support Putin. And I think that has to be acknowledged as well, because when we say that this is all Putin's war, well, it's not him out there literally killing Ukrainians. This is, the war that belongs to Russian people and is part of, Russian. It's going to be on Russian conscience forever, not just Putin. This is a bigger problem.
Maybe, do you believe, Yuri, that there are some people near Russian dictator Putin, maybe some businessmen, maybe some politicians that are very tired because of Putin's war, and they want to maybe change him or kill him, or talk with Ukrainian authority about real peace and negotiations?
I'm sure there's lots of people around Putin who really can't stand it, would love it if he would disappear. And boy, are they just terrified that somebody will find out, because it's deadly, because this is KGB we're talking about. So it's easier for me to discuss security situation in the United States than it is for me to make guesses about what likely to happen to Putin. But it seems like he's in pretty good shape right now. That doesn't guarantee anything ever, because Russia is a very unpredictable place that way, and who knows what will happen tomorrow. But I would imagine that his opposition within the country should feel kind of even more defeated, because he's stuck to his proverbial and literal guns, I mean Putin. And look, he said he was going to wait, and he indicated that he was going to wait until elections in the United States. The elections occurred. The outcome is clearly favoring him, because now the United States switched from being an ally of Ukraine to being a referee between two warring parties. So who would support, overthrowing Putin? Of course, if the war stops, then Russian economy may collapse, and that would be bad for Putin. But that might be a reason why, in the end, whatever he says about negotiations, if we take the presumption that Putin is that his economy will collapse because it is a war economy and he can't really stop. There's not like a elasticity there, an elastic problem, apparently there's a term now about supply and demand. That Putin has to continue war, therefore he can't really finish and be real about negotiations, and therefore this is all for naught.
What do you expect from the visit of Keith Kellogg and J.D. Vance to the Munich Security Conference?
A lot of talking, a lot of hot air, a lot of possibly fist waving, a lot of saying how amazing President Trump is. In a way, I have to say that, well, I mean, it's true, they're going to say it. But you have to, kind of following what I was saying today, is that Keith Kellogg is not a particularly heavyweight in American politics. J.D. Vance without Donald Trump is, a door handle without a door. He's a vice president of the United States. But since the election, since the inauguration, we hear Donald Trump and we hear Elon Musk. We don't really hear J.D. Vance. So taking J.D. Vance and sending him to Munich with Keith Kellogg, I'd rather see Jared. Maybe Jared Kushner would be a bit more, heavyweight than these two individuals, who do, as far as I'm concerned, do not project strength of America on the international stage. Maybe ignorance and posturing. So hopefully it's going to be taken the right way. But considering that we are currently, as the United States, as a country, are in the process of realigning who our allies are and who our enemies are, I think a Munich Security Conference is a nice way to show that America has now no leverage, no strength, projects weakness, and sends vice president and retired general to this conference. Not good.
But the key message of the Munich Security Conference is peace through strength. Who should demonstrate this strength? The US, Europe, or both?
Irina, I have to correct you, although you make an interesting point. It's peace through strength. Strange is, it's kind of what it's going to be. Strength is an important idea, because I keep thinking about this. We do need to project strength, but when we cut USAID, when we act irrational in every possible way on a federal level, when President Trump makes statements like he did about Gaza, we are not projecting strength. We're projecting irrational, not exuberance, but some other word. And it's scaring people off. So I think that this is just this is not strength. This is irrational weakness, anxiety, bad negotiationship, and it's important to say nice words. Nice words, you got to have them too, because sometimes 47th president can't even find those. But after that, there's got to be actions. And in the end, there has to be there has to be new weapons to Ukraine, whether it comes as Lend-Lease, whether it comes as paid for by Ukraine's natural resources, which is cynical as all get out, but why not? Somehow there has to be new weapons to Ukraine soon. And I think that's what I'm not seeing, and everything else is just hot air and posturing.
Ukraine bombed 26 military targets of Russia oil refining complex, its airfields, and this is only in January and February of this year. How painful are these strikes for the Russian dictator Putin, and how much does this strengthen our position at the negotiation table, future negotiation table?
It appears that this is a wise move because in a war of attrition, one of Russian weaknesses historically has been logistics, getting things from point A to point B. In addition, Russia being a world gas station, or at least fancying itself as one, this would be another way to demonstrate that it is unreliable, it cannot be worked with, because if you want to do business with Russia, you're going to lose money. And why would you want to do that? So I think Russia and Ukraine are now, this is not quite guerrilla warfare, but it almost has that kind of a situation where it is asymmetrical, where Ukraine fights back not on battlefield necessarily army versus army, but in a way that maybe is just as effective and potentially can help Ukraine achieve its result, its desired outcome, which is to have Russia admit that it cannot and will not be able to conquer Ukraine, and that it has to stop fighting. And I think that these types of attacks do not signal long-term security, but they can be very effective, I believe, in helping bring Russia to negotiation table through the war of attrition, not just Ukrainian soldiers, but also Russia's capabilities, which continue to decrease. Russia continues to get weaker by the day.
But maybe, like, to make our conversations like a circle, maybe next Russian military targets and goals will be bombed by tomahawks?
It seems like with Ukrainian ingenuity, tomahawks may not be needed. What I mean is this. I think tomahawks have specific purpose, and if there was a tomahawk that went at FSB headquarters in Moscow, I'd be all for it. But we cannot discount the amazing ability of Ukrainians to defend and to sink ships and to defend themselves and use drones and build basically a drone army, it seems like, and be able to sink a Black Sea fleet without having a fleet of its own. I think that really just revolutionized sea battle and sea warfare. So I think that was without a tomahawk. That was a drone boat. So I think that tomahawks have their place and have their purpose. But in the end, maybe the problem is even bigger than a tomahawk can fix, although there's certainly things that it can do.
Yuri, thank you very much. Thank you for this great conversation, for your original thoughts, and for your time. See you next week.
Thank you. My pleasure, and same to you.
Thank you so much. Take care. Host of YouTube channel Rashkin Report and local elected official in Wisconsin was with us. My name is Irina Uslova. We're glad to see you all guys every week. So please subscribe to our YouTube channels, Rashkin Report and Rashkin Report in English and War and Politics 24. Thank you so much. Take care.